When we think about Britain in World War II, the popular image is a small island nation that was defending itself against the Axis horde. That's far from the truth. During World War II, the British Empire was the largest country in the world, with colonies that spanned across numerous different continents. And the jewel of this empire was the British Raj, a combination of modern-day Pakistan, India, Bangladesh, and Nepal. While there's a lot of information about British, American, Russian, and German troops, when's the last time you heard about the smaller powers that contributed massively to World War II? So, sit back, relax, and get ready to learn about the role of the British Raj in World War II. It sounds a little odd at first. The British were actually trying to downsize the Indian army during the beginning of the war. But just think about it. You're an oppressive, bloodthirsty empire, and you really don't want to train and arm a populace that's probably gonna rebel against you. In fact, when India was forced to contribute to its overseers' war, there was a Quit India movement, which called for the end of the British rule over India. So the lack of a proper army for India became a massive problem when you consider just how badly France got taken out. Suddenly though, the Indian army had to be transformed from more or less a garrison force to a full-fledged military power within only a few months. And this endeavor proved to be successful, as by the end of the war, the Indian army would number around 2.5 million and became the largest volunteer army in history. Needless to say, this was not an easy transformation because the Indian army lacked the proper equipment to train with. So while the army was massive, their supply was not. It took a few months of recruiting and training until the first Indian troops could begin taking an active role in the field. Instead of being a garrison force in the Middle East, the main force that came out of it was the Indian 4th Division, which was assigned to North Africa. This unit was probably the best trained and best equipped force that the British Army had at the time, and therefore served as the core of the British Army in North Africa. Now, when Mussolini first ordered the Italians to invade British Egypt, it was the 4th Division, along with the 7th Armored Division, that served as the main fighting force against them. What was supposed to be an Italian offensive turned to an Italian disaster when they clashed. The 36,000 Allied soldiers clashed against 150,000 Italians. Not only did the 4th Division repel the incoming Italians, but they also managed to completely devastate them on the offensive front too. When the Italians were repelled, the British officers committed an offensive and surrounded the 10th Italian Army by outmaneuvering them with their mobile units, instead of just letting the Italian army retreat. They were so fast that they even managed to get around the Italian forces, and beat them to many of the locations where they planned to retreat to. This eventually led to their complete and utter destruction of the 10th Italian Army at Bardia, and gave the British a much needed morale boost to show that they were still in the game against the Axis. During what was known as Operation Compass, the Indian troops did a lot of heavy lifting as they served as the vanguard and the main infantry force for many of the battles. Especially at the Battle of Sidi Barrani, it's safe to say that the Indian Army played a vital role in North Africa, which was one of the most important theaters in World War II. If the British had lost Egypt, it would have cut off the Suez Channel, which would have split the empire in two. The Axis forces could also threaten the oil fields that the Allied forces held in the Middle East, forcing them to take a longer and more dangerous supply route through South Africa. After Operation Compass, the 4th Division was sent to East Africa, where the Italians had better success than they did in North Africa. The Italian forces were able to conquer British Somaliland and establish themselves as the hegemon in East Africa, and even somewhat threatened the British supply lines that ran through the Red Sea. The British saw that this was a significant threat and invaded Italian Somaliland in order to regain control over East Africa. So the 4th Division teamed up with the Indian 1st Division and some Free French troops, and launched Operation Appearance, which pushed the Italians from the coast. The inevitable engagement finally happened at the city of Keren in modern-day Eritrea. 13,000 Indian British troops engaged around 23,000 Italian troops, and were able to beat them soundly. This was a decisive battle in the East African campaign, which regained British control over Somaliland and securing their supply lines. The success of the British in East Africa would not carry over for the entirety of the theater. Erwin Rommel would soon arrive in North Africa with his Afrika Corps and cause a significant amount of problems for the Allies during his tenure there. Rommel would launch an audacious offensive which would push the British back. In most of these encounters, it was the 4th Division that held back major breakthroughs for the Axis army. While Rommel was massively successful in North Africa, his lack of resources and ability to gather resources for his army proved to be a decisive reason for his eventual defeat. Throughout the entire war in North Africa, it was the 4th Division that served as the core of the British Army. Due to its resilience, the British were eventually able to turn the tide against Erwin Rommel and push him out of North Africa, thus allowing for the Allies to take Libya and win the North African theater. The contribution of the Indian troops during World War II cannot be overstated. They were a major reserve of manpower and resources for the British. Though the Indians acted heroically and competently, the army reflected the colonial state they were recruited from. The Indian men served as the infantry troops, while the Anglo-British men served as the officers. While some Indian men were able to gain some positions as NGOs and even officer positions, this was often an exception and not the rule. In fact, many Indian veterans did not even receive a pension for their service in the war. Though World War II was global in nature, the popular imagination does not seem to reflect that. Our intention in making this video is to educate people on the contribution of the Indian troops in North Africa. We'll also be making a part 2, which will focus on their contribution in Burma against the Japanese. So thanks for watching. Make sure to leave a like and subscribe if you enjoyed the video or if you learned something new, and we'll see you in the next one.